I woke up on the floor, not dramatically, not like in the movies. No gasping, no sudden jump, just cold tile against my cheek, the faint throb of something in my mouth, and the smell of metal. I didn't move at first. I thought maybe if I stayed still, the world would stop shifting around me. The light was gray. Early morning, my apartment's kitchen window open an inch too far. I sat up slowly. There was blood on my shirt. A small spot, right at the collarbone, dried dark. I touched my lip. It split under my finger. Just a little. I must have fallen, or hit something. Or I stood. The clock on the oven blinked 6:12 a.m. The fridge hummed, like it always does. My phone lay face down on the floor nearby, battery dead. Everything looked normal, familiar, except I couldn't remember falling asleep or being home at all. The first thing I did was shower. It didn't feel logical, just automatic. Like if I washed everything off, I could go back to being someone who wakes up in bed, who doesn't taste iron in the back of her throat. I stood under the water too long. My fingers turned pale. Afterward, I sat on the edge of the bathtub and stared at my knees for 10 minutes. Then I got dressed. Then I checked my bag, wallet, keys, headphones, and a flash drive. Small, silver, no label. I didn't recognize it. I held it in my palm like it might burn me. The news was on in the background, some morning anchor talking about traffic delays and rain. I only noticed the shift in her tone. Police are asking for witnesses related to an assault last night in the East Bridge district. The victim, a 38-year-old male, remains in critical condition. The apartment showed signs of forced entry, but police haven't confirmed if anything was taken. East Bridge, 3 blocks from me. I turned up the volume. Anyone in the area between midnight and 2 a.m. is asked to contact detectives at... I muted the TV because I suddenly knew what was on that flash drive. I didn't know how I knew. I just did. I opened my laptop, plugged it in. One folder, time-stamped 2:11 a.m. Inside, a single file. Security camera footage. Grainy, dim, black and white. A hallway, narrow, familiar. Then the camera angle shifted, static, and it showed the inside of an apartment. Curtains drawn, a lamp knocked over. A man slumped on the floor, unmoving, and in the lower corner of the frame, a reflection of someone standing near the window, facing the camera, head turned slightly to the side, hair tied back, pale collarbone, blood on her shirt. I stared at the screen, throat dry, heart hammering, because it was me.
I watched the video 3 times before I let myself blink. The man was face down on the carpet. There was a smear of something across the side table, maybe blood, maybe wine. The timestamp in the corner read 2:08:13 a.m. The footage was jumpy, flickering, like it had been recorded from a hacked security cam or a wireless baby monitor. The camera panned slightly, like someone holding it was adjusting their grip. Not a mounted feed, not automatic. Someone had filmed this. The reflection in the corner was the worst part. It wasn't me exactly, too distorted to be certain. But the posture, the jawline, the way the figure stood with both hands still and low, it felt like me. Like watching myself in a nightmare I didn't remember dreaming. The figure moved toward the window. A hand reached out. The screen cut to static. I slammed the laptop shut and jumped to my feet. I was shaking, not just fear, shame. Something deep in my chest, like a weight I hadn't earned but still had to carry. What scared me most wasn't the footage. It was the fact that a piece of me wasn't surprised. I opened my texts. Nothing after 10:24 p.m. A single message to Becca. Home now. Talk tomorrow. I didn't remember sending it. I opened my recent calls. Last outgoing call, 1:17 a.m. No contact name, just a number I didn't recognize. I called it back. One ring. Two. Then, this number has been disconnected or is no longer in service. I tore through my drawers, found an old notebook I hadn't used in months, and flipped to the back page. I always wrote things down there when I needed to clear my head. Memory flashes, things I wasn't sure were real but felt too loud to ignore. There was a scribble in my handwriting. He recognized me. I should have waited longer. It wasn't dated. I didn't remember writing it. Below it, in smaller script, as if I'd been hiding it from myself. If he dies, what happens to me? I went to the bathroom and stared at my face in the mirror. Split lip, swollen. No bruises on my hands, no blood under my nails. Just tired skin, dry eyes. Someone trying to look whole. Then I looked down and noticed something. Under my sleeve, near the wrist, a faint red line. Not fresh, but not old. A scrape. Exactly the kind you get climbing through a narrow window. There's something strange about looking at your own calendar and not recognizing the life it describes. I opened mine on my phone, trying to trace my steps. Yesterday, 8:45 a.m., work, client call. 12:30 p.m., lunch with Becca, canceled. 3 p.m., errand. 7 p.m., blank. No details, no locations, just the word errand. I hadn't entered that. At least, I didn't remember doing it. There were no route histories. My GPS timeline for the day was blank after 3:12 p.m., like I vanished into thin air. I checked my rideshare app. Nothing after the morning commute. I opened my banking app. One charge, $6.95 at a convenience store in Eastbridge at 10:07 p.m. The same neighborhood where the assault happened. I didn't remember going there, but the store's name was familiar. My heart started pounding again. Not because I'd forgotten, but because somewhere I already knew this wouldn't be the last time I'd been there. I put on sunglasses, tied my hair up, and walked to the store. It was raining, one of those dull, steady rains that feels like background noise in your head. The fluorescent lights inside flickered as I stepped in. The cashier didn't look up. I wandered the aisles for a moment, unsure what I was even hoping to feel. Then I saw the drinks fridge. A bottle of ginger tea on the top shelf, same brand I always buy. One was missing. I turned to the cashier. Hi, were you working last night? He stared for a moment. Yeah. Did I come in? He squinted. You look like her. Like who? He shrugged. The girl in the hoodie. You bought gum and tea, didn't say much. Was I alone? He hesitated. I think so. I stepped back, pulse rising. Think so? He tapped the counter once. Didn't say a single word. Back at home, I dug through my trash. The tea bottle was there, crushed. Gum wrapper next to it. I held it in my hand. Proof? That I'd been somewhere I didn't remember being? My phone buzzed. Becca. Hey, you okay? You sounded off last night. I stared at the message. Last night? I opened our chat. 10:58 p.m. You. I need to ask you something, but you have to promise not to freak out. I never sent that. I never even opened our chat. I read it again. The phrasing, the cadence. It sounded like me. And that scared me more than anything. I wasn't going to look. That's what I told myself. That I could just delete the file, wipe the drive, block it all out, and go back to normal. Whatever normal even was. But something in me itched. A pressure behind my eyes. The kind of knowing you can't explain but can't ignore. So, I opened the news again. This time, I searched for the article directly. Breaking. Eastridge resident hospitalized after late-night assault. There was a photo. Grainy, probably pulled from social media. A man in his 30s, lean face, slight beard, standing in front of a bookstore with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Name, Julian Morrow. 38, freelance tech consultant, lived alone. Condition, critical but stable. There was no mention of suspects, no video, no evidence released to the public. But I knew what the inside of his apartment looked like because I'd seen it. Not in person, through the lens. The lamp knocked over, the gray couch, the crooked painting near the kitchen. I could picture it all. Because someone had filmed it, and somehow I had that footage. The name didn't ring any bells. Julian Morrow. I said it aloud. Nothing. I checked my email, my texts, even my junk mail. No matches. Then I searched him on social. His profile was private, but his username caught me. @restore mode. That phrase? I flipped open the back of my notebook, scrawled on the last page, nearly faded. No reset, no restore. I sat very still. I dug deeper. One tagged photo showed him at a tech meetup 4 years ago. In the background, me. Hair shorter, lighter, laughing with someone I barely recognized. My old roommate from college. I zoomed in. Julian was facing away, talking to someone, but it was him. And I had been there. I scrolled through my old college photos. There, in a group shot, me, 3 friends, and barely visible Julian in the background again. No caption, no tag. But his face was turned toward the camera, and he was looking at me. My stomach sank. He wasn't a stranger. We'd crossed paths before, maybe more than once. But the worst part wasn't the memory. It was that I didn't know what he was to me, or what he had been to me. I didn't call Becca right away. I just stared at our message thread, reading that one line over and over again. You sounded off last night. What had I said? What had I sounded like? I finally typed, "What did I say?" She didn't reply for 2 hours. Then, "You okay?" I wasn't, not even close. But I couldn't say that. Not without explaining everything. Not without dragging her into the version of myself I was beginning to suspect I might have buried. So I said, "Just tired. But seriously, what did I say?" She replied almost immediately this time. "You called around 11, asked if I remembered that night at the conference. Then you laughed and said, "Never mind," then hung up. My hands went cold. What night? You didn't say. Honestly, you sounded off, kind of like you were pretending to be yourself. Pretending to be myself? I sat with that for a while. Then she added, "You okay? You're scaring me a little." I lied. "I'm fine. Just needed to hear a voice." I went to Becca's place. She lived in a sunlit apartment above a florist shop. Always smelled like lavender and dust. We used to drink cheap wine and talk about all the ways our lives weren't turning out right. She opened the door halfway, one foot blocking it, like she wasn't sure yet. "She really don't remember calling me?" she asked. I shook my head. She stared for a second, then pulled the door open wider. "You want tea?" I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. She handed me the mug and sat across from me. Silence thickened between us. She finally said, "You said something else before you hung up." "What?" "You said, 'It's not done yet.'" Her voice was quiet, afraid. Then you laughed, not like yourself. Honestly, Nat, it creeped me out. I tried to hold the mug steady. Failed. "Do you think I'm—" I stopped. Couldn't finish the sentence. She looked at me. Really looked at me. And then said, "Did something happen?" I wanted to tell her. I really did. But something in me held back. That pressure behind my eyes again. That knowing. So I just shook my head. She didn't push. But when I left, I saw her watching me from the window, hand on the curtain. Like she wasn't sure I'd come back as the same person. And maybe she was right. They didn't kick the door in. They knocked. Soft and polite, like they were selling something I didn't want. I froze mid-step, still holding a glass of water. My throat was too dry to swallow. The knock came again, firmer this time. Then a voice. "Miss Avery, it's Detective Collins. Just a few questions, nothing formal." Nothing formal. The phrase rattled in my skull like a joke with the punchline I couldn't afford to hear. I opened the door halfway. The man on the other side was tall, tan trench coat, no notebook in hand. Not yet. He gave me a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sorry to bother you this early. We're just doing a door-to-door sweep. Incident nearby." He waited. I nodded slowly. The assault. I saw it on the news. He tilted his head slightly. "Mind if I ask where you were that night, between midnight and 2? I blinked. He smiled again. "Like I said, nothing formal." "I was home," I lied. "Asleep." "Anyone who can confirm that?" My mouth opened, closed. "I live alone." He nodded once, like he already knew that. "You ever seen this man before?" He held out his phone. Julian's face stared up at me from the screen. Softer, younger, probably taken years ago. I looked at it too long. Not enough to be suspicious, but just enough to wonder what expression I was wearing. "No," I said. Another lie. The detective stared at me for a beat too long, then tapped something into his phone and slid it back into his coat. "All right. Appreciate your time." He turned to leave, then stopped. "One more thing," he said, still not looking at me. "If anything comes back to you, anything strange, It's better to bring it to us than try to sort it yourself." He smiled again. It was worse than a threat. People get confused. It's easy to fill in the blanks the wrong way. The door clicked shut. I didn't breathe, didn't move. Then I realized something. He never told me the victim's name. There's a moment right before sleep where your brain starts letting go, separating what's real from what just feels that way. I couldn't afford to let go anymore. So I stayed awake all night, just sitting on the couch, watching the front door, the windows, the clock ticking forward without any promise of answers. At 2:13 a.m., I pressed record. The next morning, I watched the footage. The camera sat on my dresser, pointed at my bed. I'd propped it there with 2 books and a steady hand. The first hour showed nothing. Just me, lying still, eyes closed, sheets tangled around my legs. Then at 2:12, my body moved. Not like a restless shift, not like dreaming. I sat up slowly, mechanical, fluid. I stared straight ahead, past the camera, toward the mirror on the far wall. Then I stood. My hands hung loose by my sides, fingers twitching slightly. I walked across the room and stopped in front of the mirror, and just stood there, watching myself, for nearly 5 minutes. Then I said something, barely audible. I turned the volume up. Static hissed, then a whisper. "Not yet. She's not ready." I sat back down in bed, laid flat, closed my eyes. The rest of the footage was still. I stared at the screen for a long time, not just because I was afraid, but because a part of me felt detached, like I'd known all along something was moving inside me, like I'd been waiting for proof. I walked to the mirror in daylight. Same spot. There was nothing strange about it now. No flickering, no delay. Just a tired woman with dark circles and a new scar under her wrist. I leaned closer. I whispered, "What did you mean?" The mirror said nothing, but the echo in my chest whispered back, "You already know." I didn't remember starting a journal, but I found one under the bed. The cover was black leather, worn at the edges. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was mine, but heavier, more urgent, like the pen had been pressed harder than necessary. Each word looked like it had been carved instead of written. The first few pages were blank. Then, halfway through, I found the entries. July 3rd, 1:14 a.m. I woke up outside again. No shoes, knees scraped. I don't know where I was, but I was running. I remember the red door. July 9th, 2:01 a.m. She's not a stranger. She's just what I became when no one was watching, what I turned into when no one stopped me. July 12th, 3 a.m. If I'm going to do this, I have to be sure. I have to be calm. I have to be empty. I flipped faster. July 17th, 11:39 p.m. He looked right at me. I don't know if he recognized me or just recognized it, the part of me that wasn't scared anymore. July 20th, question mark, question mark, question mark. It's already done. My hands were sweating. The pages curled where my fingers touched them. I flipped back to the front of the journal. In faint ink, nearly erased, something had been scribbled on the inside cover. Do not read past this point unless you're ready to become her again. I closed the book. My pulse pounded in my ears. I thought of the police, of Becca, of Julian's face in the news, the way he looked toward the camera in the old photo, the way I had looked at the mirror in the video. And suddenly, it all felt circular, like I was running in a spiral, not a straight line. Like every time I thought I was pulling away from it, whatever it was, I was actually closing the loop tighter. I wanted to believe I'd been framed, or sick, or manipulated. But the journal didn't lie. It didn't sound like someone else. It sounded like me. Just the version I kept locked in the dark. I thought I'd buried it. Like a bad dream. Like something someone else told me once, in confidence, that I carried around as if it had been mine. But it was mine. And it wasn't buried. It was waiting. 4 years ago, there was a party, a college conference late spring. I had too much wine, too little sleep. The night blurred into lights and laughter, and one hallway I shouldn't have gone down alone. I remember pieces now. A red hallway, the sound of a phone dropping, hands where they shouldn't have been. Laughter that didn't sound like mine. And after that, silence. I didn't tell anyone, not really. I filled out a report, anonymous, unsigned. The school sent out a generic email about campus safety protocols and confidential support options. Nothing happened. Not to me, not to him. His name wasn't Julian back then. It was J. Morrow, listed on a volunteer tech panel. He shook my hand once, I think, told me something about AI and memory training, said you're too sharp to be hiding in the back row. I had forgotten that line until I read it in the journal. I searched old emails. One stood out. Subject line, still thinking about that hallway. No sender name, just the email. restore.mode.2@outlook.com. I opened it. Don't worry, I'm not angry. But you owe me a face-to-face before this ends. You remember me, even if you made a version of yourself who doesn't. It was dated 3 weeks ago. Everything inside me sank. This wasn't random. Not a break-in, not a psychotic episode, not some spiral I was helplessly caught in. This was closure. This was planned. And I didn't know whether I was trying to cover it up or complete it. I went back to the building. Julian's building. The one I'd seen in the footage. I told myself I was just going to look, stand outside, maybe walk past the front door once. But I had the flash drive in my pocket and the key. I didn't remember taking it, but it was on my nightstand that morning, attached to a plain black ring, unlabeled, just like the version of me who'd used it. I stood outside the apartment for 20 minutes. The hallway was quiet, dimly lit, carpet worn at the edges. I could still see the imprint of his body in the footage. I could still hear my voice say, "She's not ready." My hand hovered over the lock. Then I turned the key. It was empty, cleared out, shelves bare, couch gone. The light from the window still filtered through the dusty blinds like it did in the video, but it felt hollow, like the moment had already happened and I was just walking through its echo. I left the flash drive on the counter, sat on the floor, and waited. I don't know what for. Redemption, maybe. Arrest. A version of myself I could reason with. But no one came. No police, no voice in my head, not even him. Just the sound of wind outside and the hum of a refrigerator that didn't belong to me. It's been a week since then. Julian's out of the hospital. I saw his name in the updates. Expected to make a full recovery. They still haven't found the person responsible. But they will. Because I think I left her behind. Not in the legal sense, in the real one. I left the version of myself that needed revenge, that couldn't move forward, that whispered things in mirrors and scrawled threats in journals at 3 a.m. I'm not her anymore. But I remember being her. And that might be worse.